barren couple tries to have kids, but gets involved with their next door neighbors. What happens when they both find out? Katie is in the toilet, pacing worriedly as she holds a pregnancy strip. On seeing the negative result, she breaks into tears and goes to meet her husband in the bedroom. She says she's not pregnant. He tries to console her, but she would have none of it. She says she just wants to have her kids and has waited enough for 5 years and is unsure how many more years she can wait. In the subsequent mornings that follow, she's forced to watch from her own flat how her neighbor takes his kids out and how he bonds with them when he's in the compound. When her husband, Kingsley, gets back from work at night, she tries to get him to make love to her, but he declines with the excuse of being tired. Katie expresses her worry of being thrown out of or replaced with another woman by his family if she fails to give him children, and he says it cannot happen, as whether or not she births children, she remains his family. After trying in vain to get Kingsley to make love to her, she gives up. The next day, over their meal, Kingsley announces that he will be traveling in 2 days and will be gone for a week. He wants to visit the other branch of his office. Katie asks why he's just telling her about his travel plans when he has to leave in 2 days. He apologizes and says he just needs to visit the other branch of his office. Katie says it is okay, at least they still have 2 days to themselves. However, the first night, contrary to her expectations and much to her dismay, all that Kingsley does is sleep. This happens the next night too, and he travels as planned. She steps out the next day to see her friend. On her way out of the compound, she meets her neighbor and her husband. She asks about their kids, and they respond that the children are doing very well. When Katie gets to Amaka, her friend's place, she's met with various suggestions. Amaka says she visited a prophet on Katie's behalf, and he gave her a bottle of holy water. She gives it to Katie and says she has to pray over the water, sprinkle it around her house, and wash herself down there with it. Katie's surprised as Amaka isn't even a church person. Amaka says she would do anything for her now. Katie, however, says she doesn't think she can wash herself down there with the water. Amaka says she should overlook the smell of the water and use as instructed, as it would make her potent. The next day, Katie and Amaka hang out in a restaurant. After eating, Amaka says she has to quickly leave to see a guy. Katie says Amaka should limit the number of guys she sees. Amaka shrugs and says she has to eat now. She leaves Katie in the restaurant and hurries off. Her neighbor from across the fence, Alex, walks up to her in the restaurant, surprised to see her. He asks if Katie is stalking him, but she says she should be asking him the question, as she harmlessly came to have lunch because she was too hungry to cook. He says he only came to take home lunch too. His phone buzzes and it's a picture of his twins. Katie requests to see the picture and cannot stop gushing when she does. Alex has to leave and he says they'll be seen later at home over the fence. Katie's neighbor, Alex, comes knocking at the door with one of his twin kids and says he needs to borrow her jack as his tires are faulty. After gushing over his twin kid, Katie allows him to use her jack, which he promises to return pretty soon. They meet up in the restaurant the next day, and Katie says she has something important to tell Alex. She says, as he might have heard, she and her husband are childless. Alex looks at her pitifully and says yes, he has heard, and that she will still have kids as God's time is the best. Katie then says she has something to propose. Alex says she can bring up her business idea, but she says it is not a business idea. At first, it is so hard for her to say, but after pushing herself and drinking her glass of wine, she finally says she wants Alex to be intimate with her so she can have kids, as the success of her marriage depends on whether or not she can bear kids. Alex is taken aback as to why she would even say something like that. He says he can never do something like that, and Katie shouldn't ever mention it again. Amaka is ashamed of Katie when she gets to hear what she did. She wonders what must have come upon her friend. Katie, however, says she did what she had to do. Katie returns home one day to see Tochi, Kingsley's brother, at home. He has brought another woman to replace her. According to him, she would bear children for his brother since she has been unable to give him children. Katie asks that they both leave the house, but Tochi maintains that the house is no longer hers, as there is now someone else to replace her. Kingsley comes home and is informed of a replacement for his wife. He gets livid and chases both his brother and the woman he brought out of his house. He pleads profusely with Katie to not be offended, as he doesn't have a hand in what his brother did, and he would forever love only her as his wife. Katie becomes even more pressured to give Kingsley a wife, so she meets up with Alex again in a restaurant. She begs that he help her save her home, as it is on the verge of collapsing. After so many pleas, Alex agrees, but on one condition: she has to tell his wife about it, and if she gives her permission, only then can he help her out. Katie is skeptical that his wife would allow them, but Alex insists that she has to tell his wife, otherwise he will not help. Katie tells Amaka, who thinks it is a bad idea, to tell Alex's wife about her plans. Katie says she has to do it to save her marriage. Alex gives one last consideration, which is that after Katie bears the child, she has to go abroad or somewhere far away, as he cannot set his eyes on the child. Katie says she would do anything. She goes over to Alex's house to to see his wife. The plan is to seek her permission for her husband to sleep with her. But after hearing her threaten to break the legs of whoever eyes her husband over a phone call, Katie changes her mind against telling her. Instead, she says she just came to say hello to her and would like to get going. The night when Alex and Katie are to make love to each other comes. At first, Alex is reluctant to sleep with her. He says he cannot bring himself to cheat on his wife. But after Katie pleads with him and assures him that he only has to do it once, he goes ahead to sleep with her. She gives Amaka the full gist on how it played out between herself and Alex. She says she won't stop at once, but will keep sleeping with him till she gets pregnant. Amaka says if not for inconveniences, she shouldn't be friends with Katie because wow, she has a lot of games up her sleeves. Alex is home with his wife at night when he gets a call from Katie. At first, he declines it, but when he gets persistent, Alex excuses himself to answer the call. Katie says she wants more with him, and Alex says it cannot happen as they had an agreement that it was only going to be once. She persuades Alex and finally he comes over after his wife has fallen asleep. After the whole intimacy, they fall asleep and do not wake up until the next morning when someone knocks on the door. Turns out, Kingsley is back from his business travels. Not knowing what to do, Katie runs to the door and opens it for her husband. She, however, stops him from going upstairs. She says it is that time of the month and that she's feeling so uncomfortable and sticky, and so she needs him to quickly help her get pads. He drops his bag in the living room and quickly goes to buy pad. While Kingsley goes to get the pad, Katie helps Alex escape through the back door. Then a few minutes later, Kingsley returns with the pad. Alex goes to his own house and his wife says he left her yesterday. He says he didn't want to disturb her as he only had to go attend to business. Kingsley and Katie are eating at the dining table when Katie suddenly feels uneasy and excuses herself from the dining, saying she has cramps. Kingsley does not seem to understand her awkward behavior and goes to meet her in the bedroom. He asks if she's okay and she quickly says she's okay, save for the cramps that she has. Later that night, they both get mushy and cuddly and Katie wants Kingsley to make love to her, but he gives an excuse of her being on her period and not wanting to serve as an inconvenience. While he sleeps, she uses a pregnancy strip to see if she has gotten pregnant, but it is still the same old story. She's not pregnant yet. While she's pacing around the room, Kingsley suddenly hears his phone buzzing. It's an SMS from Kingsley's mother. She says she's giving him an ultimatum of 5 months to give her grandchildren. Otherwise, she will find a replacement for Katie. This puts Katie under more pressure and she goes to meet her friend, Amaka, the next day. Amaka says Katie has to be careful with the way she's going about the whole thing. Katie says she's desperate at this point, especially as her mother-in-law is seeking a replacement for her. Amaka says she cannot keep playing this kind of dangerous games with a married man, and Katie flares up, saying Amaka is only angry because she refused to be involved with the young guys she suggested for her. Amaka apologizes and says she's free to do as she chooses, but she should just be careful. Alex is frying plantains with his wife, who joins him in the kitchen a while after. Katie's call comes in and he quickly excuses himself to attend to her call. She says they need to meet because she needs to discuss something with him. When they meet at a restaurant, Katie tells him it's been a month that they have been having sex for at least twice a week and she still is not pregnant. Alex says it could be her fault. Katie says she has run tests on herself and the hospital ascertained that she's perfectly okay. It could therefore be that the problem is with Alex. She asks him to think about the whole thing very carefully. Alex stares at her for a while and says he has to excuse himself. Back at home, Alex cannot get Katie's words out of his mind. He is lost in thoughts when Lillian, his wife, comes in. She asks if he is okay and he says everything is fine. Alex is going through some documents one night, deeply lost in thoughts. When he's done, he goes into the room of his twin kids and stares at them for some moments before he leaves. The next day, he comes home fuming with an envelope in his hands. He calls for Lillian, who comes running. He throws the envelope at her and calls her a cheat, a liar, and a whore. He asks who owns the kids since they are not his. She immediately goes on her knees and says she can explain. Alex asks her to begin her explanations. Just before she can say a word, he changes his mind and asks the father of the kids. Lillian says it is Kingsley. Alex asks, which Kingsley exactly? And she says it is their next door neighbor. Alex is even madder. He bundles her to Kingsley's house. Kingsley is seated and Katie has just entered into the sitting room when there is a loud bang on the door. Katie quickly opens the door and Alex and his wife come tumbling in. Katie asks if all is well and Alex says he is not the father of his supposed twins. Instead, Kingsley is the father. Katie is dumbfounded and Alex asks Lillian to start explaining herself. Lillian swears that it was a mistake and then starts to explain. It all happened one night when a drunk Kingsley gave an equally drunk Lillian a ride home. On getting to the compound, both parties left for their different flats. Lillian would, however, come into Kingsley's house as she misplaced her keys and her husband wasn't home. Kingsley, not knowing what he was doing, has sex with Lillian under the influence of alcohol. It isn't until the following morning that they both realize what has happened. Lillian has to hurry off to the airport to pick up up her husband, while Kingsley has to put the house in order because Katie would be home in a bit. Lillian would later find out that she's pregnant. Kingsley would ask her to act as her husband impregnated her, as he cannot risk his marriage for a mistake that happened between them. On hearing this, Katie is pained and asks if this is how he chooses to repay her for everything she did to keep their marriage together. She says she's done with the marriage. All of Kingsley's pleas falls on deaf ears as she marches upstairs to go get her load. Alex too walks out angrily. At their various homes, Alex and Kingsley cannot stop thinking about the whole thing. Kingsley gets himself drunk and wasted with alcohol, while Alex thinks and thinks. Time passes and Alex and Kingsley get over the incident. Kingsley accepts the kid as his, and Alex goes back to being with Katie.